I want to take a moment and introduce our awesome speakers here. So Scott Seiler has been working in information technology for over 30 years at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, and he's a certified change management professional, a certified project management professional, and a certified ProSci advanced instructor. While his primary focus is in IT, he's also an assistant teaching professor at Notre Dame's Mendoza College of Business. Thank you for being here, Scott. Next, we have Michelle Malloy. Michelle has been at CDOT for the past 15 years, working in the areas of leadership, strategy, process improvement, lean leader, project management, and change management, and is currently leading CDOT's new initiative, Concept to Project. Michelle's why is to be the best servant leader possible and ensure that everyone impacted by change is successful with that change in order to provide the best value, products, and services to all of her customers. In her spare time, she is the director of the Public Sector Change Practitioners Group, which is hosting their bi-monthly webinar with us here today. So, very excited. Thank you again. And I'm going to pass it off to Michelle and let you do your good work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can you share our screen?
All righty. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And first of all, I'd like to thank Washington State Lean Transformation Conference for having us. I believe this is the second or third time I've presented at Washington State, and it's just a fabulous conference, and I'm so happy that we can be collaborative with you guys and that we're all here together today. So very much thank you. We're very excited to hold our biannual conference like we said, so this is going to be really, really interesting today. So a big collaboration. Next slide, please. The purpose of the Public Sector Change Practitioners Group, or PSCP, as I'll probably call it from here on out. We get together, we're very agnostic. We talk about all types of methodologies in change management. We learn and we build from each other. We try to inspire and encourage each other. We're just a big team where we really like to engage and talk about change. And the overall umbrella of our world is that we want to ensure that everyone impacted by change is successful with that change. Some of the perks that you would get if you want to join our free community of practice is the bi-monthly webinars. We also send bi-monthly newsletters out. We just started a book club. Patricia Nord, one of our directors, started a book club, which is awesome. We did connect with PMI, and you can get PDU credits. We have a library of resources on our website. And right now we're working on doing some more strategic planning. How can we grow? How can we do things and add more value to our members? And we do, you get the webinars, newsletters, book club sessions, and we're trying to work on nonprofit status as well. So if you are a member of PMI and you need PDUs, at the end of today's session, we're going to send out a survey. And if you fill in that survey, we'll send that attendance to PMI so that you can claim those credits. So just look for that at the very end. So our agenda for today, we've already talked about our purpose and welcome. I'm going to real quickly introduce our board of directors. We have one quick announcement, and then we're getting to the big meat of everything. Scott Seiler. I love Scott. He is awesome. This is the second time Scott has presented at PSCP, and the first time, obviously, that we're all collaborating together with Washington State. So I can't wait to get that. So, and then we'll close out at the end of the day. So real quickly, our board of directors for the PSCP is myself, Elizabeth Solchik, Corey Niemeyer, Doug Oates, Patricia Nord, and Jamie Joy just joined us recently. So we do have one opening on the board, and these people are wonderful. They're what makes everything happen. And so the one opening on the board is our announcement today. If anybody's interested in joining our board, the next slide, please. We have an opening for the Director of Operations and Learning Development. So if you want to join our team and work with us, we have a lot of fun putting on these webinars and thinking how we can add value to all our members. If you do want to do that, shoot us an email at at pscppractitioners.org and answer those 3 questions. Why are you interested in joining the board? Why are you suited for this position? And what is your favorite thing about change management? It's that simple. We keep everything simple at PSCP. So the bottom line for us, the more we engage, collaborate, and encourage each other, the more we will accomplish. Helping each other help others adjust and adopt to change is why the PSCP exists. So reach out, collaborate with us, join us. We just would like to hear from you. The more people we get involved, the more we learn. Next slide. Again, how can you engage? Present, at a biannual or a bi-monthly webinar, share during our sessions, ask questions during our sessions, and remember to complete that survey at the end if you'd like those PD credits. With that, I am going to introduce, next slide, Scott Siller. He is, again, wonderful. Notre Dame, whoa, go Notre Dame. He's going to be talking to you today about change leadership. So with that, Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Michelle, there is a question in the Q&A also about joining PSCP.
Okay, yeah, and we will answer that at the end. I have some slides that have QR codes that you can just snap real quick. And we will also give you the link to the website. And when you go to the website, you just click on Join PSCP. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks, Michelle. It's just an honor to be here speaking with the Lean Transformation Conference. My first exposure to this conference, but the numbers are just amazing. So I'm thrilled to be here and hope that you find this to be helpful.
So to start, as Sam said, I've been at Notre Dame actually 33 years here in a couple of weeks. I've been doing change management since 2011, but really managing changes, well before that. And we have a team in our IT department of 5 change managers right now. So just to give you a little level set there. I have this quote on my door, and I think it explains, very well the dilemma of change, right? The dilemma is we hate change and love it at the same time. What we really want is for things to remain the same, but get better. We want that improvement. We don't necessarily want all the pain sometimes that goes with making that type of a change. So here's a quick cartoon for you to read. This talks a lot about sponsorship and leadership. So the bottom panel, the group says, why not? You said change is good. And the leader says change is good for other people. So embrace it or I'll fire you. Hopefully not the way change is happening in your organization or on your team, but unfortunately, the way that change does happen too often. So a quick video about change and sponsorship.
I'm the Chief Executive. I've worked with my fellow directors to create a brilliant strategy. I will now tell him what to change to make my brilliant strategy work.
I'm a manager. She's told me what I need to change to make her brilliant strategy work. I'll now tell him what to do.
I'm a member of staff. He's told me I've got to change. I don't know why, so I won't.
As Chief Executive, I decide which way to steer the ship. I then get him to make it happen.
As a manager, I work out how best to make change happen. And then I get him to do it.
I can't be trusted to think for myself, so he tells me what to do. I just ignore him.
As Chief Executive, I want him to sweep away the old and bring in the new.
As a manager, I want him to break old habits.
What's wrong with how we've always done things? If it ain't broke, why fix it?
As Chief Executive, I tell him not to let up on performance for a second. Onwards and upwards with every change.
She's obsessed with performance, so I tell him it's got to be right first time.
If it ain't right first time, he's on me back about performance. So I just go back to how we've always done it, and everyone's happy.
Okay, so I don't know if this sounds familiar to you or not, but it certainly is a relatively common situation where we tend to tell people that change is happening without really worrying about resistance or getting buy-in. And you heard some of the comments that the employee was making there. You know, he doesn't know why the change is happening. He's just going to ignore the change. If it's not broke, why fix it? You know, those types of things that we need to overcome when we're trying to manage change. And what we're going to look at today is a couple of scenarios with sponsors being the central part of that change. So if you would, believe this was put into the chat, but if you would go into pollev.com/Seiler82, or you can also join by text if you want. And what we'd like to do is just have you, in one word, tell us what you think the most important duty of an excellent primary project sponsor is. So while we're doing that, while those answers are coming in, we're going to look at two cases today, one that didn't go very well and one that did go well, and look at some lessons learned from both of these cases so we can understand a little more about what a sponsor is supposed to do, what we want them to do, and towards the end then we'll actually look at a couple of activities that we want to make sure that sponsors can perform clearly and very well. Yeah, look what's coming up. The top things there: communication and communicate, support. Okay, so those are some great comments. There's some other things there: roadblocks, champion. All right, so very good. Those are some good answers, and I think the kind of thing that we will look at as we go through the rest of our hour here this morning. Okay, so we're first going to study the reorg. Before we start into it, I want to show you this cartoon, and there's a reason why I want you to see this particular one. So the leader says, I just got word that we're about to start a two-step reorg. In step one, we'll centralize functions. Then in step two, we'll realize it was a huge mistake and reorganize back to the old way. So we'll come back to this here in just a few minutes. So just to give you a quick background, where we were, this change happened a number of years ago, but our IT organization at the time really didn't have a very good strategy, and employees didn't really have a way to prioritize their work because there was nothing to point to say this is more important than something else. We also had very unequal support on campus. So we had we called them the haves and the have-nots. You know, some departments had a tremendous amount of support, others had none. And really the best way for somebody on campus to be able to get an answer to a question or fix a problem was to know somebody in the IT organization. So not a great setup for the way we wanted to work. The change that was happening. So our IT leader at the time decided that we would kind of completely take down our organizational structure and rebuild it using something called an internal economy. So basically what this meant was we weren't going to dedicate resources to any department, and instead we were going to ask all the departments to come with money in order to pay for the things that they wanted to have done. It was certainly one way of prioritizing work. It also allowed us to serve the entire campus, or at least that was the theory. We did provide strategic consultants for each of the departments so that they could help the vice presidents work on their IT strategy and help them decide what was important for them to spend their money on. We did have a sponsor. He was our IT leader, Unfortunately, he was at totally the wrong level. So just very briefly, we have a president of the university, we have an executive vice president, and a provost that are kind of at the second level. And then the president has what's called the President's Leadership Council that includes vice presidents, deans, that level across the organization. Our IT leader at the time, he was not called the CIO. He actually reported to one of the assistant vice presidents. So he was 2 levels away from being in the President's Leadership Council. As a result, we just did not have enough buy-in. Our IT leader's boss was not bought in. And you can imagine, without really getting much information or having much influence, the President's Leadership Council had very little, if any, buy-in to the project, but we pushed on. We didn't really do much resistance management at that level, and we tried to continue the project, but it struggled from the very beginning. We did have our IT staff heavily involved. So one of the ways to overcome resistance is to involve people in the change. We did that, but almost too much so. So we had 1/4 to 1/3 of our staff involved in these 3- and 4-day-long meetings that happened every 6 or 8 weeks for a year. It really, really hurt our production across the rest of the organization. There was a lot of passive resistance. People would sit in these meetings nodding their heads, but we didn't really have their buy-in. And to add to this, because we took the organization and really took it all the way down and built it back up from the ground up, everybody was transitioning to a new role. Some people maybe 50%, some people as much as 100% of their job was new. So we had all these people going through all these transitions at the same time. That was a lot of change to handle. Well, you can guess what the results were. Things went from bad to worse. We thought we couldn't get anything done before this reorg. It got even worse after the reorg. It ended up costing the IT leader his position, and we ended up with a new CIO whose first action was to transition us back into the old organization. So we kind of, calling up that cartoon that we started this with, we made the change and then we ended up changing right back to the previous way things were. What did we learn from this? And this is what's important, right? We learned that the sponsor needs to be at the right level. Our sponsor was 2 levels away from where he needed to be. That really hurt the effort in this case. We need to get buy-in from the key stakeholders. So I know that sounds very simplistic, but we never really identified who the key stakeholders were. We didn't try to get their buy-in, and it ended the way we thought it was going to end. Passive resistance is real. It's one reason why managers are so important, because managers can recognize when their staff is resisting, even if it's a passive resistance, and they can step in and help overcome some of that resistance. We didn't do that, and we had a large amount of passive resistance, again, that came back to really hurt us in the end. And we need change management. We didn't have anybody focused on change management at the time. I was not in a change management role when this happened, and nobody was focused on the people side of this change. And I think that was because it was a reorg. It was so heavily involved on the people side, we just didn't focus on the right things. So our second case study, the new system. This was more recent, so not too long ago, but several years ago. A little bit of a background. We had an email system on campus that had pretty low storage limits, myself included. A lot of people every month would go in and delete email because we kept bumping up against the limit. We had multiple calendar systems on campus. Students were on one system. You can see those students actually had moved to Google a couple of years before, so they were on Google Calendar. Faculty and staff, actually, we had, I believe, 3 different calendar systems between the faculty and staff on campus, so nobody could schedule meetings with anybody else. It was very difficult. We did have in our favor that previous system changes had been moderately successful, so there was some appetite here to make this change on campus. The change itself involved moving to Google for our email, our calendaring, and our storage. The advantage was our faculty and staff now were on the same system as students. So faculty especially could schedule time with students or vice versa. Staff across departments knew they could schedule people into meetings. And it was a very positive experience moving to Google for most of the campus. We had two benefits from this as well that sound kind of odd these days, but not too long ago, these were pretty important. And that is we had support for mobile, so Google would work on your phone, which the previous system did not, and we had these large amounts of storage available to us now. Now our sponsor. So in contrast to the last project, our sponsor now is almost at the right level. In the meantime, between these two projects, the IT leader is now the CIO. He is now sitting on the president's leadership council. So he has access to all of the people that we need to have access to. Now, granted, it would have been nice to have had the president or the executive vice president as the sponsor for this, but our CIO did a great job, and actually this worked out very well. He was completely bought in as a sponsor, completely supported the project. And in fact, we had a Star Wars theme to this, and you'll see a little bit more about that here in a minute. But our sponsor even dressed up as Yoda for a couple of meetings that we had just to show his support for what we were trying to do. That's a picture of him there on the screen.
Now, our IT staff, in contrast to the last time, people were a little more bought in, but part of it was because we did some change management. And we did change management actually for the project team. A lot of times when we do change management, we think about the impacted end users and we identify who is impacted by a change. We sometimes forget about the project team. We had people on our project team who had managed email servers and had some other services they provided that were going away. Now, our CIO, another example of being a great sponsor, he promised nobody would lose employment in this process. Now, some people's jobs might change 100%, but nobody would lose employment. So that was huge. We did have a Star Wars theme to this, and we did something called a Jedi Challenge. So we used one of our learning management systems. We built these tests to help people learn more about Google and how it worked. If you passed the first test, you became the level of Padawan. If you passed the second test, Jedi Knight, and so on through Jedi Master and Yoda. And one of the cool things was, we set that up as part of our change management. But one of the cool things was there were departments that started challenging each other as to who could have the higher percentage of Yodas in their department. Something we hadn't really planned on, but it's cool to see this change management kind of take off, not only in the IT department, but our library and some other departments got involved as well. They took part in some of these challenges and helped us promote the change, and with the Star Wars theme as well. So that actually became a lot of fun.
What kind of results did we get? Well, the technical transition went extremely well, very smooth, which, we had to have that in order for the rest to really work. But our buy-in was excellent. It wasn't 100%, okay? I won't say that everybody bought in, but our buy-in was excellent. We had a lot of people that made this change and really, really wanted to make the change. One thing that we did overcome was a short ramp-up time. So we made the decision in January to go to Google and have the go live be in July. So 6 months wasn't much time, but we were able to get everything up and running in that amount of time. What lessons did we learn from this? The right sponsor is critical. It's vital. We have to have somebody there that's going to support us, that's going to promote the project, it's going to build that coalition of sponsorship across the organization. And we have to have buy-in not only from key stakeholders, but in this case, from across our organization. Resistance management helps. Again, if we build a sponsorship network, people that across your organization can support the change, especially down at the lower levels of the organization, they can help reduce that resistance that helps make the change smoother. And change management does make a difference. We actually had 2 FTEs on change management for this project because it was so critical that we succeed in this case. So we use the ADKAR personal change model from ProSci. This is something that we have used for a dozen years, and this is how we impact our changes. ADKAR is awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So just briefly, how we use each of these and how the sponsors tie into this. So we had 4 goals for our project. Now, one had to do with saving money for the university. We didn't actually use that when we were talking to people because most people don't care about saving money for their organization. But what we did do, those other 3, the other 3 goals had to do with the ease of use and being able to communicate with people across campus and the increased storage. And we kept really emphasizing those goals. Our sponsor would go into a meeting, talk about this project. He would emphasize those 3 goals. When we communicated, we emphasized those goals as well. So we wanted to make people aware of why we were changing. That's the big thing with awareness. If we can let people know, here's why we're making the change, that helps them prepare for the next step, which is desire. So how did we build desire for people to make this change? Well, we used something called Change Champions. We called them Google Guides, and they were people from departments all across our university. We gave them some advanced training. We made sure they knew why we were making this change. And then they were able to go back into their areas and help answer questions, help support this transition for people from the old system to the Google system that we were using. We also had campus involvement in committees that were involved in this as well. And a lot of times they were people that were at the level of our CIO. So he had built this network to help get people involved. We had open Q&A sessions across campus, so multiple locations, multiple times. Our CIO showed up at a number of these. We would give an 8 or 10-minute presentation, and then the rest of the hour was a chance for people to ask questions, maybe to voice their concerns. It wasn't just, it wasn't all happy questions. Sometimes there were people that were a little upset, and so we wanted that to come out, right? We wanted to be able to talk about those things. We did some fun things too. So the picture that's there, our HR staff picnic for all of the administrative staff, how it always happens in June. We were going live in July. So we had this balloon arch. We were going Google Balloons. We had people take their pictures in front of the arch. Just a fun thing to get people, again, to buy into the change. Now, once we've built awareness and desire, then we can start looking at knowledge. And a lot of times, our first reaction is, well, we'll just send people to training, they'll know what to do, and then we can move on from there. But if we don't have that awareness and desire built first, the training is not going to be as effective. So we did a lot of just-in-time training before we went live. And we were able to show people, here's what you're going to see with calendar, with email. Our Google Guides were out in the departments helping answer questions before we went live. And then after we went live, we did also a lot of training so that people would understand more about this is exactly how it's going to impact me and in my job. And again, our sponsor had a lot to do with making sure that people at his level knew about all these training efforts that were going on. Then once we have knowledge, we want to build ability. We need time to process this change, right? If you think about the first time you drove a car, you probably weren't a great driver the first time you got behind the wheel, but over time, as you learned, you got better and better. That's the idea with abilities. We need time to actually get better in what we're doing. Google Guides helped with that. We did something called Help Desk Plus. Again, our CIO, our sponsor, helped make sure that people in IT had some extra time available to be able to help out at our help desk and answer some questions that came in. And the other thing to help ability, because time is important, is we did this rollout during the slowest possible time. And our sponsor helped with the people that he talked to determine what that was. So we landed on the middle of July, slow for most of the campus, not everybody, but also about a month or so before the start of a semester. So people had a little bit of time to get used to the system before the students returned in August. The last piece then is reinforcement, because it's great to do everything that we've done so far, but if we let people go back to the way they did things before, then we don't get our return on investment that we'd like. So again, the sponsor did a great job of, we're all in this together, and he really had that theme going as well. We did not allow this. It comes from having that sponsorship and that buy-in at the top level of the university. We did not allow backsliding. So in the past, when we had changed calendar systems, there were departments that were allowed to kind of go back to a calendar system that they had previously, rather than use the new calendaring system. It's how we ended up with 3 different ones on campus. But because we had the buy-in at the top levels of the university, we didn't have the requests for people to go back to what they had used before. And of course, our sponsor did a great job of reinforcing this change, continuing to talk about, here's why we changed, here's how the effect that it's having, here's we're getting these good reports from people all across campus. So he was doing reinforcement at his level as well. So ProSci does do research in addition to training, and what they have found in the surveys they do surveys every other year for the last 20 years, the #1 contributor to success and the #1 obstacle to success are actually the same thing. It's sponsorship. Right? If you have a really good sponsor who's active and visible and communicates well and builds this coalition, then we have a better chance of being successful with our project. If we have a poor sponsor, one that's not engaged, one that is not communicating, that person can be the #1 obstacle to success for our project. So see a few people have found this already. That's great. Sponsors are most comfortable with what? Are they most comfortable with decisions related to scope, budget, and time? Are they most comfortable with the actions of promotion, support, and communication? Is it pretty much they do both really well? They're both comfortable with both of those, or they're not really comfortable with either one of those? Going to wait just a second as we're looking at the answers coming in. We will talk here in just a minute about the 3 things that we want sponsors to do and how we can do that. Okay. So it looks to me, not surprisingly, this mirrors very closely the research that ProSci has done, that leaders are most comfortable with scope, time, and budget, hovering right there around 49–50%, right? That's typically what leaders do, right? They work with a budget, they set the scope of a project and the time, so they typically are more comfortable with that. What we need them to do in addition to that, though, we need them to work on the promotion and the support and the communication of a particular project. A lot of times they don't do those things because nobody tells them what to do. And as a change manager, that's part of our job. Project manager works with them on scope, time, and budget. Change managers, we work with them on promotion, support, and communication. So these 3 things, being an active and visible sponsor, so the promotion part, building a coalition, so developing support, and then that whole idea of communicating support, communicating out, here's what the project is, here's why we're doing it, those 3 things are important. So a quick video to show you a good example of a sponsor and the way that they are active and visible.
I am the how coach. I am the character coach. I am the people coach. The head football coach's job has a lot more to do with people than players. That's the way we look at it. So that is what I told them. And it's an elite group. A lot of them were looking me up and down, left to right, measuring me up. And I kept saying, guys, I'm not much. I get it. Okay, I'm not much. All right. But I could feel the energy, and I could feel they've embraced the change. And I know there's going to be a lot of challenges ahead. I know there's going to be people that fit with the change, that don't fit with the change, that like the change, that don't like the change. But change is hard. And everybody wants change until you get change. Well, I got news for everybody. Change has arrived.
So I love that video because he is such a supportive sponsor. You know he's engaged. He knows people are maybe not as engaged in the change as he is. He's willing to bring them along. He knows there are people that have bought into the change, but you can see he's active and visible in his role as a sponsor of that change, right? So the second thing we talk about is how do we develop support across the organization? Now, if we had a change that was impacting all 6 of these areas, it would be ideal if we could have A as our sponsor, because A has impact over all 6 areas, has authority over all 6 areas. Most of the time, what we see here at Notre Dame is the sponsor might be B or C. Right? A may not have time to be the sponsor. So we take a sponsor who has time to do it, like B or C, even though they're not exactly at the right level. What we don't want to do, though, is we don't want to rely on D or G, for example, to be the sponsors, because they have very limited influence over the groups that are impacted by the change. Right? So as we look at this, it'd be great if A, B, or C could be our sponsor. So if we assume that B is the sponsor, now B needs to influence C so that the people in C's organization will buy in. B also will influence D and E, and D and E can influence their direct reports, and so on. So it's a very kind of hierarchical method. But what we do is we lay this out. We look at which areas are being impacted, who are the leaders kind of up the organization chart, and where do we think they fall in terms of support? Are they for this change? Are they against the change? Are they in the middle? And then we can look at who influences those people. Sometimes it's hierarchical. Sometimes, H and J maybe are friends and or they work together a lot. H is for the change, J isn't. So we might go to H and say, could you talk to J and just talk to him about his concerns and what kind of what kind of resistance he's having. Let's see if we can maybe pull him over to be a supporter, right? So as the sponsor, the sponsor needs to look at this kind of a layout and be able to say, okay, I can influence these people. I could get these people to maybe influence these other people. And that's part of building that support, building that coalition across the organization. The third area then is communication. And this is something a lot of times, depending on the sponsor, we will actually write some of the communications for our sponsors. Now, sometimes it's bullet points and they'll take it from there. Sometimes we'll write things out and they'll go in and they'll edit to make it sound more like their voice. But we want to make it easy for sponsors, right? We want to make it easy for them to communicate what they need to communicate out to the departments that are impacted. A lot of times, if we're just doing what's called a telling plan, we focus on those first 2 bullets. What's changing? When's it changing? Okay, you look back at some of the communications that go out, that's all that's there. From a change standpoint, those are important, but we want to include those other 4 bullet points as well. Why is it changing? Why is it changing now? What's driving it? Is there a law that's changed? Are we starting something? For us, it'd be the start of a semester maybe that's driving a change. What's not changing? because people need something to hold on to, something that's consistent. If so many things are changing, we want to make sure they know this isn't changing, this is staying the same, right? And then what's the risk of not changing? So they understand how important, how vital it is that we actually make this change when we need to make it. So there's a lot of other things that we include in our communication, but if we can answer these 6 questions, it's a great start of a communication plan, and it's also the kind of thing we want our sponsor to make sure that he or she understands so that they can make sure they're communicating this out to all the impacted groups. And lastly then, and then we'll have some time for questions, who do we want to hear from? Who do we want to hear from in terms of the business reasons for change? So think about this just a second, right? The business reasons for change, changes that are impacting the organization. We want to hear those reasons from a high-level executive. So in our case, if there's a change impacting the entire university, we'd like to hear that from the president or from the executive vice president, one of the top people in the university. If there's a change that's impacting our IT organization, we want to hear from our CIO. She would be the one that would deliver that message. Then the other question is, who do we want to hear those personal reasons for change? The what's in it for me, the WIFM, right? We want to hear those from our direct manager, right? Our direct supervisor. Why? Because they're the ones that know us the best. So on the previous slide, if you noticed, there wasn't really a what's in it for me part of that communication. That's because those communications are higher level. They're going out maybe to larger groups. Those personal reasons for change, that actually needs to be personal. It needs to come from somebody that knows me well. Typically, it's the supervisor. And these answers are, again, from the research ProSci has done. It's been consistent survey after survey, year after year. We have to have the right speaker, the right deliverer of the message in order for it to actually be impactful. People do not want to hear from the HR representative or the change manager or the project manager. These are the people they want to hear primarily from. Okay. So with that, looks like we have a couple of questions. So first question says, what questions can change managers ask to help influence getting the right sponsor? Yeah, that's good. I think laying out, so before the project starts, if you have an idea of who is going to be impacted, who's primarily going to be impacted by a change, then you can look at the org chart, kind of build from the bottom up, right? Look at that org chart and see how far up the chain you need to go to get somebody that has impact over pretty much the entire group of impacted, impacted areas. Now, it may be a situation like ours a lot of times where we have something that impacts most or all of the university. We are not going to have the president of the university as a sponsor. So we do end up sometimes going down a level, in who our sponsor is. But I think that's something you can do, is to lay that out to see, who's impacted and who has the most influence over those groups. When we initiate communication, how important is it to follow the order of the displayed bullets? It's not important. Those are 6 items to make sure you cover. I would say the order depends on who's delivering the message. I don't think there's a specific order to those at all. Oh, good. Thank you, Katie. We have some from Anonymous. Do you have any suggestions how to handle change fatigue? For example, when an organization is constantly changing and doesn't provide time to settle.
Yeah, change fatigue is a hard one because that's not really addressable at an individual project level.
What I think you can do, though, and this takes some time, it's not an immediate answer, but one thing you can do is build up the change capability of an organization. We have found it very helpful to do a lot of training of individuals in our IT organization across our campus. We just did a 3-day change certification on campus with 10 people, 5 from our OIT group and 5 from other units on campus. And as they learn more, we've got over 100 people that are trained now, and as they learn more, I think they can help their areas manage change better. So that's kind of a long-term solution. The other thing that we're trying to do too is we're trying to do a better job of prioritizing our projects so that we're working on those things that are really important and trying to put less effort or maybe delay the things that aren't as important. That's the other way you can address that. Could you close the chat window for me? Yeah. Thanks. What recommendations do you have for getting faculty to change? So I'm guessing this is coming from a university there.
So certainly faculty are a little bit different, and anybody that might work in a
might work in a medical institution, some kind of hospital, something like that. What research has shown is that faculty members, doctors are very similar in the way they need to be treated for change. But we actually try to treat our faculty members like we would anybody else. The difference is we don't have that hierarchy, right? A dean doesn't have the same authority over a faculty member that maybe my manager has over me, right? It's just a different relationship. So we have to do a lot more of really getting them to understand what the why is for the change, what's in it for them. And we try to get out to departmental meetings. We try to let the provost put some information out for us. We try and attack it from some different ways. But it's a very different relationship because it's not hierarchical. So it's a challenge. Any advice on the impact as a change manager when we don't have all the tech knowledge of the change? Yeah, I would say my team, I have a little bit of a technical background. My team, very little, very much the non-techies in our IT group. That sometimes can be a real advantage because as I like to say, we like to be, we're like relentlessly advocating for the end user, for those people that are impacted. And a lot of times the end users don't have technical knowledge. So, we're in the room, we're asking those questions. Like, wait a minute, you guys are speaking a language here, but it doesn't sound like English. And you're using terms or using acronyms that I'm not familiar with. We know people out there in the field are not going to be familiar with them. So let's change this a little bit and try and tone down the techie part of it. What if there's no what's in it for me during change? Yeah, and we have situations like that, right? There's times when it said people have.
We've had situations where people have changed their jobs 100% because of the changes we're going through. The whole idea is to get people to make the decision to actually make the change, even though it's something that they may not want to do, innately, but they decide to do it, right? So building that desire that we talked about, it actually has more to do with getting them to decide, yeah, I'm going to follow this change, even though I know it may not, be the best thing for me personally, but I'm going to follow through because of the why and because of, I think maybe this is the best thing for the organization. There's a bunch of research on that and some things that can be tried. It's hard, but that's hard to do. And that takes a lot. That's where the managers and the direct supervisors come into play, and also having a great sponsor, that can maybe lay down some things that helps ease that helps ease that particular change.
Okay, being cognizant of time here, probably one or two more questions. What's a great starting place to operationalize OCM to take it out of the gray, adding a more structured approach? OCM just seems so lofty, big buzzwords, limited tools and resources, unless you're ProSci certified. So I think, so we follow the ProSci methodology. So I know I do talk about that a lot, but there are certainly other methods. And I think if you go to, I would say, join Michelle's group, because they do a great job of talking about change management at a level I think a lot of people can understand, and it's not tied to a particular methodology. You might consider joining ACMP, the Association for Change Management Professionals, as well. That's a good group, even just to get on the chat there. They have some great questions and answers that come in every day. And then if we have anybody associated with a higher ed institution, NCCI, which is the Network for Change and Continuous Improvement, Continuous Innovation, is also a group that's higher ed focused, but it has to do with change. All right, last question. Can I talk about sponsorship in a more matrix organization when the org chart level doesn't work due to trust, influence, et cetera, not existing at those higher levels? Yeah, I think even in a matrix type organization, what you want to look for, you want to look for influencers, right? So it may not be as hierarchical, but you want to look for people that have influence over other people. And this is kind of what we've done with our faculty too, to go back to that question. You might have an influencer that doesn't have anybody that reports to them directly, but everybody listens to them, right? Everybody respects them, respects their opinion. So if you can find some of those influencers and maybe lean on them a little bit, they may be able to help you with the change and really act as a sponsor, even though they're not technically a sponsor themselves. All right. So I know we've got a couple other questions. Not sure how we want to handle those. I'd like to be able to answer them, but Sam or somebody else from, how do we want to proceed on these?
Yeah, first of all, thank you everyone for your active engagement. It's great to see all of these questions. So we don't have a formal way really of getting back to folks, but we will, if someone can try to screenshot those, or we can pull them after the fact, maybe we can pull a document together and post it with the rest of the presentation materials when we get the video up.
Post that with the slides. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, go ahead. Yes, take your survey. So I'm going to share my screen real quick.
We had a couple more slides. Sorry, Samantha.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. So before you go, thank you, Scott, by the way. That was an amazing presentation. You knocked it out of the ballpark again. So thank you. But before you go, if you do want to get PDUs for PMI, make sure to complete the survey that they're going to put in the chat or somewhere for you. Next slide. And if you want to join PSCP, make sure to visit the website. You can click on Join PSCP, and it's very, very simple. We are also, next slide, on LinkedIn. So you can find us on LinkedIn, join the conversations there. We have a bunch. So please join us on LinkedIn. And also, we are also on YouTube. So if you want to just go look at and also we have all previous webinars on our website, and the ones, well, not all of them. We keep some on the website, but all of them are on YouTube. So you can go back for all the years we've been doing this and see all of those webinars and learn some terrific information. And that's it for me. So then thank you again, Scott. I'm going to hand it over to Samantha.
Well, yes, thank you both. We really appreciate you